Welcome to our week 2 reflections. This week we've been exposed to quite a bit of information to look at an organization's internal and external environment. With the amount of information required to assess an organization's internal and external environment well, we can see why it is extremely important to bring multiple voices together to weigh in on strategic decisions. It would be overwhelming to think that each of us individually needs to be the expert in all of those areas that are part of assessing an internal and external environment of an organization. Instead, we need to rely on the experts around us in each area and focus more on doing good research, listening, having critical thinking, networking well, and collaborating well with others. A simple way to consider an organization's internal environment might be to look into the 4-frame model by Bowman and Deal. This is just a suggestion of a model that you can use to consider your organization's internal environment or even your simulation organization internal environment. So the 4-frame model takes into account the human resources frame of an organization, the political frame, the structural frame, and the symbolic frame. You can easily do some research online and find out about this frame. Our frame takes into account the overall talent management of the organization. In other words, we look at questions like, do we have the right people in the right places in our organization? Do we have any gaps? Do we have any talent that we need, that we're missing? As we look to the future, are we grooming people well for future positions? Is our performance management system helping us to move forward and the people of our organization to move forward, or is it detracting from forward movement? What are some of the common behaviors in our organization, and how do they impact our culture? What cultural behaviors are inhibiting our growth? What cultural behaviors are contributing to our growth? What behaviors do we need to develop more of and embed in our culture? Today, some key behaviors for organizations to consider are being more of a learning organization, more resilient and adaptable, more proactive, being a responsible organization, as well as having responsiveness to employees and external customers. The political frame then considers the way that resources are managed and distributed within the organization. So are we being ethical and moral in terms of how we manage and distribute our resources? Also, are teams receiving the resources that they need to do good work, or are they being having a lack of resources? Is there some kind of favoritism where certain teams or departments get resources and others don't? How do we negotiate when there's conflict related to resource management and distribution? Do we have open discussions about that when there's conflict? Do we use more manipulative tactics within the organization? Are there more direct forms of pressure and force that are utilized to get people to conform to some of the resource decisions? These kind of things create a culture within the organization that either supports teams in accomplishing the vision and the mission and the goals of the organization, or the way these things could be managed actually get in the team's way of accomplishing the vision, mission, and goals of the organization. Also, depending upon the product or service that our business is in, the structural frame considers multiple areas of the organization. It considers potentially the inbound and or outbound logistics of the organization, how resources are procured within the organization, how the organization operates and its operational systems and structures, It considers production and how products and services are produced. The technological aspects of the organization are also within the structural frame, along with potentially marketing and sales, administration, finance, legal, and even the service sides of the business. The last frame that we need to discuss is the symbolic frame. And the symbolic frame involves the vision and the mission of the organization and how that vision and mission is communicated. In other words, are people inspired and excited about the company and what it does? What is a company's culture like in terms of celebrations and events and key figureheads and key stories in the organization? How are those things discussed? How are they utilized in the organization? What do they involve? That starts to create a culture within an organization as well. Also, in the symbolic frame, we need to consider like how employees are motivated. What does that look like? The symbolic frame actually gets at the heart of people related to their feelings about the environment and the culture and the company's vision and mission and what it does. So how do we help people feel enthusiastic about the work that they do and believe they're really doing good work that's contributing to the organization? That's also part of the symbolic frame. So you are learning several ways this week to assess the internal environment of an organization. And this is one other way to consider it as you consider Bowman and Deal's 4 frames. I want to invite you to use one of the models that you are studying, or this one that I'm offering to you today in this video, or just consider even making up your own that maybe connects better to the culture of your organization and what your organization actually does. Now, let's consider the external environment of a company. The external environment is more of the organization's presence within its industry. So some questions we might want to think about as you looked at the readings is, how competitive is our organization within its industry? What is the competitive rivalry like? Are competitors entering the market readily, or are they leaving the market, or perhaps somewhere in between? What does the future look like related to the product or service that we're offering? Can others enter into distributing this product and service readily, or is it a difficult market to enter into? Is it fairly saturated? How powerful is our company within its macro environment? That's a key question. What industry changes are being forecasted for the industry and the company? What is a company's value proposition or value chain? As you consider the resources this week in your organization, what does your framework need to look like for assessing your company's external organization? Or what does it even need to look like in assessing the simulation organization as well? So sometimes these frameworks for assessing internal or external environment need to be a little adaptable and flexible, and we might need to, as strategic leaders, create our own for our own organization. So let's bring this discussion of internal and external analysis to a very important point. If strategic leaders are collaborative leaders who bring clarity to chaos, and internal and external analysis is important to understanding the breadth of issues involved in making good strategic decisions that move the organization toward clarity. Also, strategic leadership does not mean that we each need to be the expert in all things related to a company's organization and analysis of their internal and external environment. We just can't be knowledgeable in all of these areas. Rather, strategic leaders develop the skills of networking and collaborating with the right people who can then weigh in on the areas of expertise that is needed. So what skills might be important to being a good networker and collaborator? We will study the important moral components of this next week, and then in weeks 4 and 5, we will be discussing more specific qualities that will help us as strategic leaders be good collaborators and networkers. At the same time, I think we can see the value of humility in being a good strategic leader and the ability to know when we need more information, kind of when we're over our heads, when we don't have the information that we really need or we need it to a deeper level. So humility is important. I'd say the ability to be open to learning from others and listening is a valuable skill in strategic leadership, and the ability to develop a wide span of relationships with different types of people who have the skills and abilities and the knowledge that we don't necessarily have, or that doesn't necessarily come easy to us. So let's not get intimidated this week by all the expertise required to do a good analysis of an organization's internal and external environment. Let's just not get intimidated about that. Rather, let's consider how we can build good partnerships and develop more collaborative relationships to help us with the expertise that we need. Let's think about it that way. As we come to a close here, let's spend a little bit of time looking into teamwork in the Bible. I found a couple verses. Ecclesiastes 4:9 says that 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. And then Proverbs 27:17 says that iron sharpens iron, so a man can sharpen the countenance of his friend or her friend. So in this, strategic leaders actually recognize the importance of involving others, and they recognize when to involve others. Good strategic leaders don't isolate themselves. They don't isolate, so they get the input that they need to make good decisions that benefit the whole of the organization and the organizational members. So I pray for God to guide us and to give us discernment in building our network of fellow collaborators to support us in taking the next steps with our internal and external analysis of our organizations. I also pray for this kind of wisdom and discernment with our simulation organizations. I pray too that you work well together in your team and do more together than you could possibly do on your own, so that you can see the value of being collaborative just coming alive in your strategic leadership together. If you have any questions or need support with your simulation team, please let me know. And thanks again for spending this time together on our resources and assignments related to week 2.